let's bring in Klatt and talk a little about this race for a 4-team playoff. 8 would be sweet.
Yeah.
12 would be fabulous.
No doubt.
We've only got 4.
That's right. It's going to be interesting. Klatt joins us each week. Courtesy of mybookie.ag. Code next round to get that sign-on bonus match 50% up to $1,000 when you go to mybookie.ag. Code next round at mybookie.ag. Big Noon Kick goes to Maryland this week. Michigan at Maryland. Sharon Moore leading his troops into a game against Maryland. All right, so Klatt, a couple weeks ago, you and I argued about a Tennessee-Penn State matchup and what it would look like. Saturday was not a great day for either side of our argument on that one, was it?
Well, I mean, the argument, at least Penn State is elite in one area. There's at least one area of the team that you can say, like, okay, that's an elite area. That defense is really good for Penn State. One of the best in the country. You almost feel bad for them because they're dipping into, at least in the big games, they can score points against regular teams, right? And even, decent teams. But when you get them against like the big boys, they turn into like Iowa. Yeah. It's like great defense, can't move the ball. So I'm holding my position. Penn State's better than Tennessee. There's actually not a doubt in my mind.
Hey,
definitely.
How do you go 32 consecutive straight run calls? I mean, that's amazing. Because JJ McCarthy, I said it before we were doing our pregame, Klatt, and I'm like you. I think I heard you say last week that McCarthy is probably your third quarterback to come out in this draft behind both Caleb Williams and Drake May. And I'm just waiting to see him on a big stage be able to show off that skill set. They didn't need to. I still think he's a really good quarterback. I don't know how good he is because I hadn't been able to see it.
Well, we saw it last year, on the road at Ohio State. When they needed it. And we've seen it at times, just last week, he threw it career high. I think it was 37 times for well over 300 yards. It's there. The tape is impressive. There's no doubt. It wasn't necessarily about him or the wide receivers. It was the matchup. The speed of the Penn State pass rush is elite. Like, those guys can really rush the passer. Manny Diaz does a great job. They're very aggressive. Guys like Adisa Isaac, Abdul Carter can get after it. Denied Dennis Sutton, who's a former 5-star player. And the speed rush, Michigan was not going to have an answer for it. And rather than just sit there like so many college coordinators do and be like, well, we got to figure this out and continue to throw the ball, I'm pretty sure, I haven't watched the tape back, I'm almost certain that Michigan did not throw a straight drop back pass after the second series of the game.
Wow.
When they took a sack, every pass attempt either had play action or roll action to it from then on. And within those 32, they did call 2 passes. One was a pass interference, and then the other JJ decided to run on 4th and 1. But yeah, 32 straight runs, and you got to credit them because like play callers in our sport get so married to the system, and they feel like they've got to, they've got to legitimize their Tuesday night work, guys, and maybe even in the NFL. And something will work, a personnel group will work, and then it's like you don't see it again for a while, and you're like, what are you doing? And we see this all the time. I see it every week. There's a clear mismatch of formation alignment, something going on the game, and then the coordinator just goes away from it, and it's like they're looking through their novel over there, and they're like, well, I thought of this play, and I got to get to this one over here, and they're like, spread right to and I'm like, guys, just run what was working. And credit Sharon, that's what he did. He found those extra linemen on the field. It worked. They got big against the speed of Penn State, and he didn't get bored taking a profit. I say that a lot. People like, if they watch my games all the time, they're like, you have those like same go-tos. Yeah, they do, because it's true. As a play caller, you cannot get bored taking a profit. If it's there, continue to take it. And generally speaking, that profit, that small success is going to wind up creating or building to bigger success. And that's what happened with Michigan.
Do you have that trademarked yet? Because we have someone in charge of trademarks here on our platform. So if we'd hate to make money
Let's do it.
We'd hate to make money off of your phrasing if you don't have a trademark. I guess we'd cut you in at this point.
You guess?
I would hope. I would hope.
Hey,
I feel like we all are close enough, right?
Yeah, we're family.
I
We're
know.
family.
I know. I don't think Tennessee is better than Penn State, but I mean, aren't we friends?
No, it's Missouri. It's Missouri this year that's better than Penn State. But I digress.
Oh gosh, it's so gross. That take is so gross.
Klatt, you just sat there and watched.
I was
him.
joking. Come on.
No,
man.
no. Hey, but tell me
Again, there's the outside. Never mind.
I'll
No,
tell you.
but would you have a neutral site, Penn State, Missouri?
Penn State.
Okay.
Missouri doesn't have anything on their team outside of Burden that is elite. Penn State is a top 2 or 3 defense in the country, and say what you will about the 2 performances against Ohio State and Michigan, who, by the way, happen to have 2 of the other best defenses in the country. Their offense was averaging 40 points per game. Everyone thinks that this is like Iowa 2.0, and I know I made that comparison, but it's not. I think it's a lazy take. You look at what Missouri actually is. You look at what the SEC outside of the top 2 actually are, in particular in non-conference games this year, and they're not as good as what they have been. That's not me throwing shade at the conference. It's the best conference in the country and has been for a long time, 2 decades. But calling a spade, like Missouri is not as good as Penn State.
Okay, but how about this game day coach, Eli Drinkwitz or James Franklin? I think you got to think about it.
Yeah.
That's a totally different question.
I mean, what in the hell was he thinking? I mean, I don't
know.
get it.
And Riley, by the way, Lincoln Riley did it later in the game.
Oh,
the
yeah.
9-point, 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, you sit in the booth and you're like, wait, like, I rub my temples like this because I'm like, am I? I feel like Mugatu. I'm like, am I taking crazy pills right now?
Yeah.
Am I the only one? Is there like an army of analytics nerds sitting there thinking like, this is the right call? And I'm like, probably should kick the extra point. Probably should punt. The 4th down decisions in both games, by the way, Ohio State and in this one against Michigan, too early to put the game on the line there, in particular with where you're giving the ball to the opposition. The problem with James Franklin is that he operates as if he's coaching a team with an elite offense and a suspect defense, where he's going to have to chase points, have to be aggressive on 4th down. And that's what he says after the game. And I don't think that he understands what his team actually is. And maybe that's too harsh. And listen, James has been highly successful. Let's call a spade, highly successful. However, you've got to have a unique understanding to who are we, where are we going, and how are we going to get there. And the fact remains is that when they get into that game against Ohio State or against Michigan, you've got to operate much more like Kyle Whittingham or Kirk Ferentz. Extend as much as possible. Field position as much as possible. You are a defensive-oriented team, and at no point should you be going for it in your territory in the 4th quarter when it's only a 1-possession game. Extend the game. The 2-point conversion with 9 points, still to this day, people are like, well, they say. Then you know what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is 2 possessions.
That's right.
You created another possession necessity on your own team.
Yeah, now I know
so
I
great.
need 2.
You know that you lose.
I need 2
Good for
onside
you.
kicks. I can't even get 1. Now I'm going to have to get 2.
Yeah, I thought Franklin lost the game twice. You mentioned it in the broadcast. You're like, this is the game. He's putting the game in his offense's hands on a 4th and 6, inside the 35. And then the very next play, Corum breaks it off. And then they come down, score, and go for the 2. And you completely took your team out of it again. I was baffled by what he was doing out there.
Baffled. And this is 2 straight weeks, where I feel like coaches, they're so eager these days. I do think it's the pendulum of the analytics. And I'm not against analytics. There's a place and a time to be more aggressive than what we know historically, coaches have been. I'm fully aware and agree with a lot of it. However, it feels like the pendulum has swung. We talked about it last week. Remember, Jimmy? We talked about, who was it? Kleiman did the same thing. He put the game on 1 snap with the Kansas State-Texas game when he was the better team. To me, if you're just operating with clear eyes and evaluating the game, you extend the game in those sections. Man. I'm telling you guys, it's a lonely spot to be up there in the booth in your own head, and you're like, what am I missing right now?
Yeah. I mean, Dan Lanning
you
did it early in the USC
guess
game.
yourself. You're like, wait. It's in the computer?
Lanning did it early in the USC game. It didn't bite him, but he went for 2 early, second and third touchdowns and missed both of those.
I hate it. I hate early going for 2.
Yeah.
You are constantly chasing points.
Okay,
constantly.
That's a lot of talk about that game on the field, but you guys had to deal with it with the big noon kickoff pregame show and into that game with Harbaugh being prevented from coaching in that contest. Listen, I do think there's something to cheating the actual outcome of the game, opposite of cheating and recruiting. But the way this is being handled, I don't like it. It just doesn't feel right. I'd love to hear. I heard you on the broadcast, but for our audience that may have missed the start of that game, what do you think of how this Harbaugh thing's being handled?
Okay, so I think that multiple things can be true, and this is what gets lost, because I think, and this happens a lot, you know, in a number of different discussions, whether it's sports or culture or politics in our country, is that people think that you've got to take a side and be rigid towards that opinion, whereas a lot of times 2 things can be true at once. In this case, 2 things can be true at once. Does somebody need to pay the price? Does some consequence need to happen probably in this season because the cheating occurred in this season and there is evidence of that? Yes. Does that fall on somebody that embodies the program? Yes. Could it be a fine or a suspension for the head coach? Yeah. So I'm fine with the actions of the Big Ten. What I thought was suspect was the timing of the way that it all came down. The report leaked from Pete Thamel before an email had even gone out to Michigan. Michigan got the email at 3:48 on the plane, headed to Penn State. Thamel released his report at 3:30. That's not right? And then at 3:49, the official release goes out from the Big Ten for everybody else. So here is a team flying to State College to play a game in 20 hours. And their players are seeing it before even the AD is, because they're on social media and they're on a plane with their head coach. The amount of distraction that the Big Ten created with that within the Michigan football program, and let me finish that thought first. I think that with the timing of the suspension, the Big Ten, the unintended consequence of that was that they inserted themselves into the competitive balance of the game because of how late it went. So now you have to scramble as a team and a program. How are we going to operate tomorrow? Who's going to have that responsibility? And to me, that then penalizes the players, which is the exact thing that I would be trying to avoid if I was the Big Ten, because let's face it, whether the players benefited or not doesn't mean that they are guilty, or, and deserve some sort of punishment. So a lot of things can be true. The nuance there is obviously difficult. The Big Ten will say that Michigan slow played the week in terms of their response to the information given to Michigan, and Michigan is saying that due process didn't happen. The Joint Executive Committee clearly it smells blood in the water, and they want Michigan punished. So it's a mess. It's a mess, and it takes really deft leadership skills. And I felt like the timing was botched, and because of that, it affected the competitive balance of the game. And because of that, I praised the way that the players on the field adapted and fought through the adversity. That doesn't mean that Michigan is innocent. It just means that the players who didn't really have anything to do with this, I felt like played well through the chaos. Gosh, man, it's a tough week because everybody's mad. Everybody's mad on one side or the other. They want blood. Michigan thinks that they're the victim, and it's an interesting deal.
Joel Klatt is with us. MyBookie.ag, code next round to get that sign-on match 50% up to $1,000 when you use code next round at MyBookie.ag. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I am pointing at me with this question to you. We are a microwave society. We want to see players be great the moment they start. We have been conditioned to do that by some players that are great the moment they start. Jalen Milroe was not, but Jalen Milroe from day one to where he is now, he has developed and he is playing quarterback now, Klatt.
No doubt. No doubt. And now he has become not just a piece that they've got to play around, but a piece where that they play through. And he's become a weapon. And his ability now to make quality decisions and then use his legs not as his get out of jail free card, but as a true threat, I think is really impressive. I've been so impressed with the way that he has developed. You know, I go back and forth because I keep thinking to myself, the way that this team looked early, I'm like, man, Nick Saban has done an amazing job. It is still the composite most talented team in the country. So he's working with, the best tools in the country. He needed to develop the quarterback, and they have. And now I wouldn't want to play Alabama. Even if I was Georgia, I wouldn't want to play Alabama. The interesting part for me, guys, is the way that this season is playing out. And I know people are, and I'm not suggesting this should happen. There is a scenario where Alabama wins out and doesn't make the playoff, which is wild because they are at this moment, and I'm telling you this, they are playing as well as anybody. They are playing top 4 football in the country. But because of the way that the resumes shake out, and in particular the fact that their loss could be one of the teams that is vying for one of those spots, that there's a scenario like they need some help. It would really be great if Texas were to lose. It would be even better if Florida State were to lose. Those things might be important for Alabama, even though they're playing as well as anybody in the country. They are going to need a little bit of help, I think, to get into the playoff.
And I think we get chaos. I think it's this weekend. I don't know how you feel. Texas is not playing good football right now. And you go to Ames. You've been to Ames. Ames is a weird place.
Yeah, man. I had this is not a joke. We had a delay for a tornado this week of the season. It was the week before Thanksgiving. And we went up there, and we win the division. Okay. We were ranked, veteran team. Coach Barnett has an extension, they said, on the table. And we went up there and we get an hour-and-a-half tornado delay. I can't make this up. Go out in the first quarter, it's blowing what felt like 8 million miles an hour directly in our face, right? Like we ran it 16 straight times to open the game because we couldn't throw it. Like it's just a wild place. They're playing good football. Matt Campbell has got this team believing a little bit more. And Texas, they've been up and down up there. And they've been up and down this season. And it's interesting because it's moments within games. Last year, it was entire games. They would come out and just be like, who is this team? Why are they playing down to the level of their competition? Now, it's more minimized. And this is why they're a much better team this year. Now it stretches within games. They had it against Kansas State. They had it again against TCU. And now Jonathan Brooks is injured, and he was a big piece of that offense. He tore up his knee. He's going to be out for the remainder of the season. So now it's going to fall on CJ Baxter, their true freshman, who's a really talented player. But, Texas is up against it. This is going to be a huge test for them. There's no doubt.
All right, he's Joel Klatt. You can see Michigan at Maryland at 11 o'clock on Fox, 11 Central, 12 noon for the big noon kickoff on Saturday.
I told Jenny, I was like, let's assume Michigan wins. You got to start the post-game interview with just like, Sharon, do you want to try this again?
Sharon, a reminder, we're on network television.
We are on network television.
Find out.
I thought that after he thanked the Lord and then said what he did, Jenny should have just, or Gus should have just been like, and we'll see you in church on Sunday morning.
Yeah. Find out if he likes the morning show on Apple, because their season finale ends almost identical to Jenny's interview with him.
That is true.
With them paying some FCC fines exactly the same way.
I just thought it was amazing. Sorry, I'm taking up too much time. But at one point, he kind of like shouts at the team in the interview, like, "I love you guys." And all I could think about was old school in the wedding, where it's like, "It's so good to see Frank's dad out here." And he's like, "I love you, Dad."
Klatt, have a great week, buddy. Thank you for the time.
Yeah,
as always.
you too, guys. Later, boys.
See you, Klatt, with us. Courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code next round for that 50% sign-on match up to $1,000. MyBookie.ag. Code next round.